Hey, you guys, it's Betsy, and I actually want to talk about my own racism. So, not an easy topic for sure, and it makes me uncomfortable, but I feel like this is the time we need to be doing these uncomfortable things. With racism, there's a lot that's overt out there, obviously, but there's so much that's insidious, that's sort of invisible. It's hard to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. We might say the wrong things, and we might actually expose what's in here that we don't want to look at. So anyway, it feels important to do it. It feels like it's a step we have to take before we can progress and move forward. So my story is I grew up in a pretty much all white community in the Midwest, and what I learned about Black people really came from my socialization and from the news and from the media. I didn't know that many Black people. When I was around Black people, I did feel sort of uncomfortable, and they were unfamiliar. And what I found I figured out early on is if I'm just really nice and kind to them, then I can feel better about all this racism stuff, and I can feel better about my own uneasiness, and even feel better about slavery and all that's come before it. So anyway, fast forward a bunch of years, my family and I moved to this very diverse community outside of Chicago. And this stuff started to come up as it looks very different here. And there are a lot of Black people. I started to fear for my safety. I started to fear for my kids' safety. And they were in a school that was about half white and half Black. And I worried about their education. And here I'd taken these very stereotype ideas of what it is to be Black, and I had applied it to all the Black people that I saw here, and without realizing how ridiculous that is, that on the flip side, would we as white people ever see all white people as being the same? And yet that's what I'd done. So anyway, I came to certainly absolutely love and appreciate the fact that we have this diversity here, and that we have these different flavors, different voices, and that our kids have grown up with less of that dividing line between Black and white, and hopefully seeing more of the humanity that's underneath. And what I didn't realize is that I, as a mom, was promoting this idea of color blindness from the best intentions, but recognizing that not talking about these issues actually doesn't it doesn't speak the truth of what our situation is, and certainly what Black people are living with in a day-to-day situation, and how important it is to be talking about these issues with our kids, and bringing all of it to the light. But anyway, in time, I really have started to have this badge of honor of this community that brings issues of diversity and inclusion out to the forefront. And all of that kind of dropped out when a documentary film crew came into our kids' high schools. And here in this very, progressive community, they uncovered, lo and behold, a lot of racism. This is in the movie America to Me. And I can't help but think that it makes sense that here, even though we're putting in all these systems in place out here to address it, that still within individuals we're carrying these pieces of racism that live within us that haven't yet been exposed. So anyway, it was a big bummer. And, the kids were not surprised by it. They were like, yeah, it happens all the time that a Black kid is going to get in trouble for wearing a hat, or he's going to get in trouble for not having a hall pass, where a white kid is not, and that they are playing by different rules. And I'm learning about how parents of Black kids deal with completely different things based on the judgment of their kids' skin color, based on the judgment of their kids based on their skin color. Also learning about the absolutely devastating feeling that that parents of Black kids, especially Black boys, carry this fear of really concern for their kids' safety. And as they send them out into the world in the morning, are they gonna come back home to them at night, based on all the harm that is being done to Black boys and men? So all of this helps me realize, and this has come and gone throughout my years, is recognizing how little I do know as a white person looking through my white eyes, and certainly how little I've known about the history of Black people and the history of this country as it relates to race. The movie 13th was a big eye-opener for me, helping to me to see just how systemic this is, this oppression that has led from slavery into all sorts of systems in our incarceration, in schools, in our police system. And yet where that was really all sort of brought to light, of course, was in this recent killing of George Floyd and others that have really brought these issues to the forefront. And it's made me want to dig so much deeper into what the plight of the Black people are, and what are those barriers that that they deal with that are really invisible to us. And a big part of that is understanding more and more about the why it makes sense why Black people would be angry at this system. So anyway, a lot of learning about the world out there, but what I knew I needed to do was to keep working in here because I knew I had things to clean up. And what I uncovered was just really hard. It's still hard and hard to talk about, but is a realization that I actually do carry this belief system of being superior, that my whiteness makes me superior. And I did not see that coming. I would have not thought that that was true about myself. I've seen that out in the world. I've certainly seen white supremacists and point my finger, thinking that none of that exists within me. But here's sort of how it unfolded is I was listening to a podcast, part of the series Seeing White, which is phenomenal. And one of the episodes was fully devoted to the construction of racism or of races, and this idea of there being a hierarchy and how that was constructed based on white people really needing to be able to justify why they were slave owners and how they could treat other humans in this way. And anyway, that idea of different races, being white, having a superiority within its biology, that was not resonating with me. And I know that we're all 99.9% the same. We're the same genetic material. We're all created equal. So that wasn't resonating with me. But interestingly, this similar topic came up the next day in a TED Talk where a woman was talking about how even really nice people can carry this belief of superiority. And somehow hearing that, it like gave me an out to recognize, okay, I can be really nice, which I've been trying so hard to be, but I can also carry this idea of superiority. And as soon as I uncovered that, I started to see, wow, I can see how that's been playing out in my relations and in my interactions with people in ways that I'm not proud of. But how important that is to start to notice, I love this phrase, the water that we're swimming in. And that phrase has been meaningful to me throughout the years, and starting to recognize these things that we take on as young children without ever knowing that they're going on out there. And when we can do the hard work of looking inward and look at ourselves, how we can uncover what those things are in the water that we're swimming in. So thank you so much for listening and for hanging with me. I have one more thing that sort of struck me, and it's kind of that look at how that web of these invisible strands plays out in the world of race. And that is a story that I heard, I think it was on This American Life years ago, the story of a Black woman that moved to the Pacific Northwest with her family, and her young child was getting in trouble a lot at school. And she wasn't having any of it. She was not happy with that. She was not going to let him off the hook because she was a troublemaker. And the last thing she wanted was for him to be a troublemaker. And so she was talking about it with some white moms out on the playground. These are all the bad things my kid has been doing. And they were saying, oh man, my kid actually does that all the time, but he's never been called out for it. Or my kid does way worse than that and he's never been disciplined. And through this process of the interview and being kind of forced to look deeper at that, she started to look at her own belief system, her identity, that she was a troublemaker. And maybe the idea that she wasn't inherently bad, but rather that was the socialization that she was receiving without even knowing it. So here she was swimming in this water without even realizing it. And I don't think that that's uncommon for Black people to take on this idea of being bad or the troublemaker or less than, given how much that is out there in these quiet, invisible ways in our culture. But at the same time, this white teacher that had been disciplining her child, I'm guessing that she would have thought that she was treating Black kids and white kids equally without recognizing that within her lived all these notions and ideas of Blackness that she didn't realize were coming out through her words and actions. So anyway, that's a plea to sort of do this internal work, look inside. It's what yoga calls us to do, to look inside at these unconscious patterns that are often running the show without our knowing it. It's what our faiths call us to do, to know thyself. And if I sound like I'm up on my high horse, I promise you I will get knocked off of it tomorrow. That's sort of been my path, is like coming crashing down and realizing how little I do know. And I think that that's really important, to go at all of this with great humility and with the openness to have been wrong. So anyway, thanks so much for listening. Take care.